All right, today we're going to dive into something really fascinating. It's an educational philosophy from Indonesia called Pembelajaran Mendalam, which translates pretty directly to deep learning. This is a powerful approach that's all about transforming how students learn, and we're going to break down exactly what makes it so special. So let's get right into it.
So where does this all start? Well, it begins with a huge national goal. Indonesia has this vision for the year 2045. They call it Indonesia Emas, or Golden Indonesia. The idea is to become a sovereign, advanced, and prosperous nation. And they see education as the absolute bedrock, the cornerstone for making this whole vision a reality.
But there's always a but, right? Standing in the way of this incredible vision is a pretty big hurdle. Despite all the high hopes, the data we're seeing shows a pretty significant gap between where the country's education system is right now and where it needs to be to hit that ambitious target.
And this really frames the whole thing as a great national mission. It's all about lifting up the quality of education to meet these massive goals. We're not just talking about improving schools here. We're talking about building the human capital that will define the country's future.
So let's look at some of that data. This chart shows the PISA scores for reading literacy. That's the big international assessment for students. And you can see it pretty clearly. Indonesia's score is below both the regional ASEAN average and the international average. Now, this isn't just about some numbers on a chart. It points to something really specific, an urgent need to develop higher-order thinking skills. And that's a key piece of this whole educational reform.
So how do you even begin to tackle a challenge like that? Well, the proposed answer is this approach we're talking about, Pembelajaran Mendalam, or deep learning. Let's take a much closer look at what that actually means.
And the very first thing to get is absolutely crucial. This is not a new curriculum. I want to repeat that. It's not about tossing out the old textbooks and bringing in new ones. It's actually a fundamental shift in the whole approach, in the very mindset of learning itself. Okay, so here's the official definition. It's a holistic approach that's trying to create a learning atmosphere that is, get this, mindful, meaningful, and joyful. And it does this by developing 4 key parts of a person: their thought, their heart, their feeling, and even their body. It's really about educating the whole person.
So, how does a philosophy like that actually work in practice? Well, it's built on 3 core ideas, or keys to learning, that are actually pretty simple and easy to remember.
These 3 keys are known as the 3 M's. The idea is that learning should be mindful, it should be meaningful, and it should be joyful. Let's look at a real-world example for each one, so you can see how this philosophy really comes alive in the classroom.
First up, mindful learning. This is all about self-awareness. So in this example, a student realizes, hey, I'm reading this, but I'm just not getting it. Now, instead of just giving up, they consciously think about a strategy using a mind map that could help them learn better. They're actually taking ownership of their own learning process. That's huge.
Next up is meaningful learning. The key word here is relevance. So, instead of just memorizing a random list of English words from a book, students are asked to list what they eat for breakfast. This immediately connects the lesson to their real, everyday life, which makes that knowledge actually stick.
And finally, joyful learning. Now, this doesn't mean learning has to be, just fun and games. It means it should be active and engaging. So here, students work together to create and perform a little drama. It's collaborative, it's creative, it's interactive, and it turns what could be a passive lesson into a really active and memorable experience.
And this is where it gets really cool. Those 3 M's we just talked about, they're supported by this holistic framework they call the 4 O's. So Olah Pikir is all about logic and problem solving. Olah Hati is about empathy and moral values. Olah Rasa is for aesthetics and culture. And Olah Raga builds discipline through physical action. You can see how this all works together to develop a complete person, not just someone who's good at taking tests.
So, we've got the philosophy down, the 3 M's and the 4 O's. But how does all this actually come together in a real lesson plan? Well, this is where we see it build into a super practical 3-stage process for the classroom. The learning journey follows 3 pretty logical steps. First, students understand the main ideas. Next, they apply that knowledge in a real-world context. And finally, and this is so important, they reflect on the whole process and what they've learned. Let's walk through an example.
Okay, let's say the topic is social media. In stage 1, understand, students are just building that foundation of knowledge. They'd read a text about it and maybe create a mind map to organize all the benefits and risks. This makes sure they really get the core concepts before moving on.
Now, we move to the apply stage. This is where the knowledge jumps off the page and into the real world. Students don't just know about social media's impact, they actually go out, interview their friends, collect real information, and then present what they found. They're actively using what they learned. And this is where that learning becomes truly meaningful and, yeah, even joyful.
And the final, critical stage is reflection. This is where students turn inward. They look at their own social media habits, connecting the lesson directly to their own lives. They also think about the learning process itself, like what was hard about this project? How did we figure it out? This is where they learn how to learn, which is an incredible skill.
So what's the end game here? All of this, the 3 M's, the 4 O's, the 3-stage process, what's it all for? Well, it's all designed to produce a very specific kind of graduate, someone who is truly ready for whatever the future holds.
And this whole framework is aimed at developing 8, count them, 8, specific qualities in every single student. So what are they? Here they are. Now, this profile includes foundational values like faith and citizenship for sure, but look closely at the others. Critical reasoning, creativity, collaboration, communication. These aren't just buzzwords, right? These are the direct answer to that challenge we saw in those PISA scores earlier. These are the exact skills you need to thrive in the 21st century and to help make that Golden Indonesia 2045 vision a reality.
So, in the end, it all comes back to this simple but incredibly powerful idea. The entire system is built to create learning experiences that are mindful, that are deeply connected to a student's actual life, and that are delivered in a way that's genuinely engaging and joyful.
And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We've just broken down the mechanics of one country's really ambitious educational reform, but the question it raises is a universal one. What if every student, everywhere, experienced learning not as some chore they had to get through, but as a mindful, meaningful, and joyful journey? I mean, just imagine what that could unlock.